Welcome to Streaming Into the Void, where we discuss the streaming news for the week ending August 2nd, 2026. I'm Kim Hollis, digital marketing expert and retro gaming enthusiast.
Parents put Bluey on for their children. If I want to distract Kim, I just show someone going to a gaming convention to find retro games, and she's good for 4 hours.
I am. It's true. With me is Tim Bridey, content creator and gamer, and always the player to be named later.
But I already have a name.
Is that like being the bridesmaid and never a bride? Also, David Mumpower, author of Disney Demystified and streaming media analyst, who is once again saying the magic word.
Hello.
And the podcast is produced and edited by Raul Buriel, who wants us to get on with it.
Can't talk. Killing grunts.
Hello.
This week, we've got a big box office story. Very big. But before we get there, let's review the latest on the big news from the last couple of weeks. Where are we on the Paramount Warner Brothers merger?
Well, as we know, the attorneys general for 12 different states have sued to block the merger between Paramount Skydance and Warner Brothers Discovery. The next step in the trial was an injunction to halt the merger so that the merger could not go through. And evidently, Paramount has indicated that they are willing to postpone the merger until sometime next year. And so now we're moving into the next phase as to when the actual trial will happen. Paramount is asking the judge to have the trial this November, and the attorneys general are asking to postpone the trial until next April. The consequences of which could be rather dire for Paramount because, as we've discussed in the past, there is this what is being called a ticking fee that the longer the merger is postponed, the more Paramount has to pay to Warner Brothers for the merger. If it's postponed as far out as next April, that ticking fee could amount to billions of dollars, and that's a lot more maybe than Paramount is willing to pay, David?
Yes, we've already discussed how Paramount struggled to increase their bid from 108 to 111 billion. As things stand, they have already required 50% foreign investment in this transaction, and now there's a ticking fee in play, which is going to cost almost $2 billion per quarter. So if this lasts until April, that's another $6 billion tossed on to the current fee of 111 billion, and there's just a lot of question of whether or not the Ellisons can hang in there financially for that long. We're in a wait and see right now where the biggest decision upcoming, the next inflection point, is when the judge decides when they're going to go ahead and hold the trial. And so that next date of the trial will go a long way in determining whether or not Paramount has the stomach to stay in on this for the long term. They're certainly saying they are. David Ellison puffed out his chest this week and was all, oh no, we're not dropping out. We're going to do this. There are also some interesting political machinations going on, aren't there, Raul?
That's right. This week, the Wall Street Journal reported that California Governor Gavin Newsom is pushing California Attorney General Rob Bonta to settle the case, which sounds rather unusual given that it appears that right now the attorneys general have the upper hand in this case. It seems very likely that the merger is going to collapse. We all voiced our thoughts on how likely it was that the merger was going to go through in the last few weeks, and none of us are very optimistic that that merger is going to happen. And so why would the California governor be pushing his attorney general to settle? The suggestion being that there's going to be job losses if they don't settle. Now, that's a weird thing to say, given that right now the attorneys general would suggest that if the merger happens, there's going to be job losses. But Paramount is actively countering by saying that if you don't let us go through with the merger, we just might move out of California altogether into, one of those red states that didn't sue us. Rob Bonta will tell you that, well, you could threaten us all you want, but the fact remains you've broken the law. And just because you're saying you're going to move out of state doesn't negate the fact that you have broken the law. At this point, it's a little bit of a tug of war between the governor and the attorney general. And let's keep in mind that Rob Bonta is just one of 12 different attorneys general, as well as other parties, including the WGA and some consumers who have all sued to block the merger. So even if Rob Bonta himself were willing willing to walk away from this lawsuit, which arguably he shouldn't because it sure looks like he's going to win. It just seems unlikely that this would all blow over in a few days.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're witnessing is political because we all know that Gavin Newsom very much wants to run for president of the United States in 2028. He's going to need allies and political donors for that, and so he is kind of trying to have this both ways, where he makes Democrats happy by sounding like he's against it, but behind the scenes he may be working to close the deal on behalf of the Ellisons and thereby secure himself a lot of future political favors. Now, I'd argue you shouldn't trust anyone involved with the Ellisons for future political favors because we've seen that game play out. It never ends well. But that's a side point here because the larger issue is the sticking point continues to be whether or not the Ellisons can hold the financing for this long term. So when you're hearing that there's a push for maybe a settlement, that is likely coming from someone in Paramount's camp there who benefits from that story being in the Wall Street Journal. And for that reason, we don't necessarily believe it. Sure, there are probably conversations going on between the governor of California and the attorney general of California. That should be happening anyway, but we don't necessarily buy that the governor of California is ready to force this deal through. I think logically that one doesn't really pass the laugh test, but we'll have to wait and see because we don't really know what Newsom's motivations are now. We do, however, know that Paramount probably wants this story out there because they're pretty desperate right now. Their stock has taken a savage hit. It was off 25% from where it was earlier this year. So they're feeling the heat. And as a reminder, if this deal collapses, Paramount will have to pay nearly $10 billion to Warner Brothers Discovery, which is more than the Ellisons paid for Paramount. Folks, this is a crisis situation for the Ellisons, period, full stop.
Yeah, not to put a finer point on this, but the fact of the matter is that if this goes to trial, even as soon as November, and let's even speculate that Paramount wins at trial, which would not be a very quick trial regardless, the attorneys general could then appeal, and that appeal could take several more months. And with each passing quarter, more of that ticking fee needs to be paid. Conversely, if the attorneys general win, and then that is appealed, again, that would take several more months. The only way this ends quickly is with a settlement. And right now, I would venture to say that the attorneys general seem to have the upper hand. And once again, as I've pointed out in the past, their trump card is to delay, delay, delay. The longer this takes, the less likely this happens.
Meanwhile, it looks like Peacock has found a way to add and keep subscribers.
Yeah, they actually may be buying subscribers. The actual logistics of this is not yet very clear, but it appears that if you are a YouTube Premium subscriber, you may soon get access to Peacock included in your YouTube Premium fee. No indication that you're going to have to pay more. It's just going to be, if you are paying for YouTube Premium, you get Peacock as well. There's numerous caveats to that. For instance, we know globally that Google has roughly 125 million combined YouTube Premium and YouTube Music subscribers. How many of those are actually YouTube Premium and how many of those are actually YouTube Music subscribers? We don't know. Also, how many of those are in the US? Because as we've discussed previously, one of the big drags on Peacock is that it is a US only streaming service. So none of those YouTube Premium subscribers outside of the US presumably will get access to Peacock. But even if it was 50 million YouTube Premium subscribers, that means that overnight, Peacock would be adding 50 million subscribers to their platform, which would be a massive boom for the service, unless, of course, they're actually paying YouTube for that, for each and every one of those subscribers, in which case, with every new subscriber they add, they're losing money.
Yeah, and I think that this tells a couple of stories at once. The first is, this is not for YouTube TV. I cannot stress that enough. This is just for YouTube Premium, which means if you're paying not to have ads on YouTube, you're going to get this. And it tells you that Peacock really is desperate enough that they're considering all kinds of just wild ideas, because I don't know what type of financial kickback they're getting for this, but Raul's right. They're probably not going to make money on this deal. If they are making money, more power to them. It's a great move. Even if they're not, I get it, because at least people are going, oh, hey, it's Peacock. I guess I should try that out once, because nobody is giving Peacock a shot for anything other than live sports and Love Island. So at least people who've been casually interested in Love Island can watch that. Peacock can strengthen that brand. We've been saying all along, Peacock needs to do something. This is something. I don't know how effective it's going to be, but it's literally better than nothing. So here we go.
Finally, it looks like Disney's made a decision as to its stake in A&E Global Media.
Right. We discussed this a few months ago. As a refresher, Disney owns a 50% stake in A&E Global Media. The other half is owned by Hearst Communications. This jointly owned company has a handful of cable channels that you will recognize, including A&E, History Channel, and Lifetime. When it comes to streaming, you'll note that A&E Global Media doesn't have a very clear vision, with much of their content scattered across multiple streaming services, and some of it not available for streaming at all. As Tim has pointed out in the past when we do the ratings, sometimes a Lifetime movie shows up on Hulu, which makes sense given Disney's 50% stake in Lifetime. But without a real clear streaming strategy, it looks like Disney wasn't optimizing the value of these cable channels. And so the company was reviewing what they were going to do with this joint venture. And David, what did Disney decide?
Sell. They sold. They got out. Everyone was screaming at them to get out on all linear networks. And Disney said, well, we'll try with this one. So it is a fascinating turn of events, because before anyone gets too excited about this, it's a zero-sum game for Disney, because they added the NFL network and are subtracting A&E. So the net profit and loss here, zero. But the deal makes sense for Disney because A&E kind of stood out like a sore thumb. You hear me occasionally talk about the Disney flywheel, which is a belief that Disney should have everything connecting within its system. Josh D'Amaro is talking about One Disney that is going to make this much clearer, where everything in Disney connects to everything else in Disney somehow. Lifetime programming doesn't do that. A&E and the History Channel don't do that. These were not system fits for Disney, so they've gotten rid of them. They took $1 billion in cash for these, selling the full ownership to Hearst, who already owned half of it anyway. And from Disney's perspective, they basically just traded A&E and $2 million for the NFL network. And I think that's good, solid business. However, it has started Wall Street speculation about whether or not D'Amaro is less committed to linear networks than his predecessor, Bob Iger, was. I believe that's premature, but I also think Disney is paying attention to the playing field right now. They see what's happening with Versant. They see what's happening with Comcast and NBC Universal, and they're carefully watching what's going on with Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery. So D'Amaro is going to keep his options open, and there is a chance at some point in the future Disney takes additional steps to remove some of its current linear networks. I'm not saying they're going to get out entirely, but I do think there is some thinning of the herd that's about to happen, and this was the first step. Raul, do you think $1 billion for A&E is a good deal for Disney?
It's better than zero.
That's what I'm saying. I'm surprised they got $1 billion.
Yeah, $1 billion in cash, not in stock or anything else. They got a straight up $1 billion in cash, which they can use in a number of different ways. And that leaves Hearst essentially as the sole operators of these cable channels, which arguably means they can look to see if maybe there's somebody else out there. And David threw out the name already. Maybe Versant is interested in beefing up their cable channel portfolio, or even, Byron Allen. He's always around. But yeah, $1 billion in cash to basically rid themselves of what was probably still a profitable endeavor, but wasn't going to be one for much longer. The truth is that if you wanted to get this company into the modern age, you needed to develop some kind of streaming strategy, whether it was putting all that content onto Hulu or launching a separate streaming service. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and it wasn't going to be cheap. And instead, they opted to get out of the business with those channels altogether. And I think that was a smart move, especially if you're going to get $1 billion out of it. Sure.
So, Tim.
Yes, Kim?
I think we have to talk about box office this week.
Wait, we do?
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for this. Wait, what happened? Okay. So we knew there was a Spider-Man movie coming for a long time. We knew it was going to do well. I guess I don't know whether I'm an idiot or what, because I didn't think it was going to do this well. And when I say this well, I mean on Friday, it has an estimated earnings of $168 million. If that sounds like a lot, yes, it's a lot. In fact, it is the biggest single day of box office for a movie ever. I didn't think this sort of thing was going to happen anymore. You have to go back to Avengers freaking Endgame in 2019. Okay, after $72 million on Thursday, we're like, okay, yeah, what the heck is Friday going to be? I don't think it's going to get there. David and I are going to have a discussion about this, but there is a possibility it actually ends up with the biggest weekend ever. What? What I feel like I'm missing something here. Like, obviously the Spider-Man movies are all good, are all well received, but okay, it's been almost 5 years. The last one was December 2021 with No Way Home. In the interim, we've had multiple Marvel movies that have, for the most part, underperformed.
And then we have the Sony side of the equation. How have Sony's comic book movies done recently, Tim?
If it doesn't have the word Spider-Man in the title, they've done terrible.
Yeah, Venom's been fine, but everything else Sony touches has withered and died almost immediately. So this is a huge turnaround for them. I was joking 18 months ago. They weren't doing a Spider-Man movie because they had an idea. They were doing a Spider-Man movie because they needed money and had to do something. So here we are, and then this has already broken one record, and it's got a chance to break the most prestigious record in box office again, is what we should say.
Right.
Because remember that 25 years ago, Spider-Man's the film that started all this.
The original first Spider-Man movie, yes, in 2002, was the first movie to ever have a $100 million weekend.
So here we are, and history may repeat itself. Tim, we are going to have the conversation, but the one thing we agree on, this is going to open over 300 million, and that's only the second film ever to do that, right?
Yes, that's not a question. Like, things have to go horribly, horribly wrong. Like, everyone would have needed to see it on Friday for this to happen. So it's just a matter of how high it goes, and the range is extremely wide, and then there could also be other factors involved as well.
Yeah, we're recording this too early on Saturday to have Saturday estimates. We do know that the current expectation is that the film made 96 million as its actual on Friday. And so if you extrapolate based on the numbers we have, it would need a Friday to Sunday multiplier of 2.97 to break the record. And we both think that's a little bit ambitious for what we're seeing from Friday, but it has broken the record already. And if Sony gets in the ballpark, like even 10 or 15 million away from the record, we kind of expect shenanigans so that they can claim that Spider-Man is the biggest opening of all time. So we're not giving you a finite answer here of whether or not it will break the record. We just think it's possible Sony's going to claim that. And we've seen shenanigans happen many times while tracking box office where things don't necessarily work out mathematically, but it is what happens. And no matter what, this is a spectacular performance. It somehow makes Spider-Man No Way Home's performance seem quaint.
Right. And that actually is the second biggest opening weekend of all time, as we discussed this.
Yes, that was the greatest thing I saw in movies in the pandemic because it was so far beyond what any other film did. And from that perspective, we shouldn't be surprised, just as there was a metric here that indicated this would happen. Spider-Man Brand New Day got the most views for its trailer in history within its first 24 hours of playing. And even Avengers Doomsday, which has released its trailer since then, only got like 70% of what Spider-Man did. So the demand was clearly there, and it is a really good movie. I presume we'll talk about it at the end of the podcast. And we loved it, so we get it. We just don't know yet whether or not it's going to break the record. But no matter what, this is probably a minimum of a $1.5 billion film, and $2 billion strikes me as likely, which would surpass No Way Home's $1.9 billion.
In case we didn't spell it out completely, Avengers Endgame's opening weekend was $357.1 million in April 2019, so it was the before times. And we never thought we would see anything close to that again. And then in December 2021, here comes Spider-Man No Way Home with, well, it's funny. Like I said, it's the second biggest opening weekend of all time, 260 million. So nearly $100 million gap.
Yeah, but I do want to say, to me, that's actually every bit as impressive
because it's December. Right. Exactly.
December during a pandemic, because every other film we were discussing at the time, like Shang-Chi is a
2021's box office was atrocious. Right.
Yes.
And we're like, we're doomed. Theaters are doomed. And then, right, No Way Home arguably saved theaters.
Yes, exactly. So we have nothing but glowing praise for that film, and this is going to absolutely torpedo it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So it's possible it could come in as low, like just over 300 million. It could come in as high as 360. I think the realistic thing might be like 350 or so. And then the idea is if you get that close to this record, when you're discussing numbers that high is, pocket change.
It's Hollywood.
Sony's going to be like, hey, guess what? The weekend estimate is 360. And then they could adjust it to like, oh, it's 358. We still have the record. No one knows what it's actually going to make when it probably came in at 350, but Hollywood accounting will find that money.
And we're here for it because we love when records get broken. And these are likable people who make these films. Destin Daniel Cretton is the director of Shang-Chi, and he's also the director of Brand New Day. And he returned a great film in an almost impossible circumstance because, folks, I write for Marvel Blog. I was tracking this story behind the scenes, and this should have been a disaster project. It easily could have been another Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3, the way that Sony was forcing it through, even though they didn't have an idea for it. And yet here we are. It has an A cinema score, and it has absolutely outstanding metrics. People just love Tom Holland. It's that simple.
So this is great, guys. Box office is back. Everybody's going to the movies. Everybody's watching everything out there.
Well, it's funny that a side effect of having no new releases last weekend, because for the second weekend of The Odyssey, which is actually still doing fine, that actually had 14.5 million on Friday. It's at 360 domestic and it's 721 worldwide. After that, so let's just say Toy Story 5, which we can't discount at all because it has crossed $1 billion worldwide, was third, 1.8 million. Minions and Monsters was fourth, 1.6 million. And Moana was fifth, 1.6 million. All three of those movies, which made less than $2 million on Friday, are still in 3,000 theaters.
So just to be clear, the box office order this weekend on Friday was 168 million, 14.5 million, and then 1.8 million.
Yeah.
The films from 3 to 10 earned less than 6 million combined, which isn't even half of The Odyssey.
Of the second place movie, right.
Which isn't even 10% of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Folks, we said during the pandemic that it was going to be the haves and the have-nots in box office from now on, and we could not see that clearer than we are right now. It is just a staggering situation where so many films die immediately, and then we have that really, really good range, and then we have this new range that the Odyssey and Spider-Man and Toy Story are in, where these are all films that are going to make at least 400 million at the box office. And frankly, Brand New Day's got a real shot at 700 million. This is just staggering.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally we're glad you can still get the breakout like Obsession and Backrooms, but it is that, like we keep saying, that mid-tier, that secondary tier, that is the big red flag when you look at box office. Yes, it's great that this is what Brand New Day is doing, that again, Toy Story made $1 billion, Odyssey is at least 400 million, possibly 5, but the movies that crash and burn are much more glaring at this point. Oh, sorry, Supergirl.
Thank you, Tim. Let's now go ahead and discuss the ratings.
I guess, though, it's not nearly as exciting as box office. It is the Nielsen streaming ratings for Monday, June 29th through Sunday, July 5th, 2026. And, of course, Love Island USA is your top original series and overall series. 1.94 billion minutes for 277 episodes. One more week of new episodes to go. Its final was July 12th, so that would impact next week. So, yep, we're going to probably crack 2 billion. Really? All right. Good for Peacock, I guess, but I whatever. Okay. Not a whole lot new on this chart. A couple things worth mentioning. I Will Find You is second, 1.1 billion minutes after its breakout last week. Avatar: The Last Airbender returned about 1.1 billion minutes for its 15 episodes and 2 seasons as well. Unfortunately, new and fourth, Worst Neighbor Ever, 1 billion minutes for 4 episodes. Really, the true crime series premiered on July 1st, the spinoff of the worst roommate ever series. You think that with those titles, you think it would be like amusing stories. No, they're awful things that I can't believe people watch. Dutton Ranch is fifth, 827 million minutes for 9 episodes. This was its finale. The first season's finale arrived on July 3rd. So it didn't quite reach the heights of some other Paramount Plus shows we've seen, but again, still super impressive that it was able to pull this off with just such a limited amount of content. The Bear is 669 million minutes for 46 episodes, and it's 5 seasons. I guess that's a better hold than I was expecting for the full week of its availability.
Yeah, it certainly isn't living up to last season's numbers, but I think maybe it's benefiting a little bit from word of mouth. It is not nearly as heavy as last season, and so I think maybe fans are gravitating back towards it ever so slowly. So yeah, maybe the numbers aren't going to be as strong, but it'll maybe be around a little bit longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, we'll see if we'll see it another week. That's enough that I certainly think that we will. And I think you're right. I know obviously you guys have been glowing about the show the whole time, but a lot of people were just kind of felt like they had enough after the previous season.
The moment is definitely past, and I think we can be realistic about that, but that doesn't change the fact that it's an amazing show and an excellent final season.
New in 7th, Elle, 499 million minutes for 8 episodes from Prime Video. This is, of course, the Legally Blonde spinoff.
Yeah, definitely tailored to younger viewing audience. And I don't think that audience is very familiar with the original Legally Blonde source material. So I think...
Oh, no, that was 2001. Oh, no, its target audience wasn't born yet when when that movie came out. Oh, gosh.
I think Amazon's doing a pretty good job of catering to younger audiences. And the fact that it is actually based on previous material is entirely lost on the current audience.
It was a movie? Oh, what? Like it's hard? Okay. Oh, gosh. Oh, my God. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a decent start. And yeah, we've seen things like Off Campus do well. So this premiered on July 1st. So it did have the majority of the week, but we might see it again. So yeah, Prime Video has found its niche with the young adult stuff too. Sweet Magnolia is 430 million minutes for 50 episodes and it's 5 seasons. The Polygamist is hanging on as well. 22 episodes, 395 million minutes at 9th. And Ms. Rachel, she's cool. 331 million minutes for her 8 episodes. In movies, number 1, Project Hail Mary. Yay! 860 million minutes as it is now available on Prime Video. So they first put it out on MGM Plus on June 18th in a way probably to get people to subscribe to that. But if you just waited a couple weeks on July 3rd, it showed up on Prime Video proper. This does make it just the weekend number. So that's super impressive. And I hope it goes even higher next week. And I would expect it to. Another recommended entry, The Sheep Detectives, is second. Also Prime Video, 564 million minutes. So very solid week for them on movies. But new in third, Enola Holmes 3, 505 million minutes from Netflix. Of course, the latest in the franchise starring Millie Bobby Brown about the kid sister of Sherlock Holmes, who of course does some detecting of her own. Little Brother, we saw that premiere last week, 451 million minutes for its full week, starring Eric Andre and John Cena. Avatar Fire and Ash, 424 million minutes, so a bit of a drop from the top for last week. Not a surprise. I think they're just done with Avatar, or they need more time to miss it. Like there was a big gap between the first and second ones, not as much of a gap between the second and third, and irregardless of quality, I think that's always going to have an effect.
Exactly, and to a larger point, once again, the moment is past.
You need time for people to miss you, not completely forget you. In honor of my birthday, people watched Independence Day because, July 4th happens during this ratings week. 331 million minutes from Hulu. This happened last year, too. We noted that effect. But really, a July 4th tradition is to watch Independence Day? Come on, people. Just go watch fireworks or something. Voicemails for Isabel, 287 million minutes. And had we had this data prior to the box office, I would have sat up and paid attention because a month out, we have some Spider-Man pre-gaming. So Spider-Man Homecoming is an 8th, credited to Disney Plus, Netflix, and Peacock, amusingly, which makes sense. It's everywhere. Yeah, so it's in 286 million minutes. So yeah, people started gearing up for the Spider-Man movies a month ahead of time. So I'd expect to see Far From Home and No Way Home in these ratings over the next couple weeks as well. We wrap up movies with some things from Disney Plus. Hoppers, yay, 225 million minutes in 9th. And Toy Story 3 makes the list this week, as Toy Story 5 was dominating theaters at this point, 192 million minutes after they all returned in one form or another over the last couple weeks. Acquired is 10 shows we have seen before, still led by The Last Ship, 942 million minutes for its 59 episodes and 5 seasons. You forgot about it on TNT, but once it's on Netflix, everyone had a Last Ship summer, apparently. I will note House of the Dragon is still third, 912 million minutes, 21 episodes. Still actually doing pretty well. This will have new episodes through the second week of August. And returning in sixth, Sullivan's Crossing, 711 million minutes for its 40 episodes. Its fourth season aired from March through May. And then I guess once that happened, this has happened before, it shows up on streaming on Netflix. It has been renewed for a fifth one, so we will see this. We will repeat this dance a year from now. So mark your calendars, folks. Not much else on these acquired charts. Nothing out of the ordinary. Bluey in second, 916 million minutes. So nothing else over a billion outside of the 4 original shows, which is still fairly impressive. But that is still a fair amount of streaming minutes for July, and also it was incredibly hot during this time period as well, at least in certain parts of the country. So people stayed in and watched streaming, and hey, I said they watched Project Hail Mary. So I guess
we'll call it a win.
We'll call it a win. Yeah, I'll take it.
All right. Thank you, Tim. In our green lights and cancellations this week, an onset injury has led to the lead in Prime Video's God of War being recast.
Yeah, we previously mentioned how actor Ryan Hurst, who previously voiced Thor in the God of War game series, had been cast as Kratos in the live-action streaming series. It really was going to be a breakout role for him. Just look how successful, for instance, Fallout has been on Prime Video. Unfortunately, a bicep tear during filming means that he'll be unable to continue in that role, and he has been replaced. And they haven't yet announced who the replacement is, but this is really unfortunate for an actor who was about to have a breakout role.
But I guess if you're Kratos, you can't really tear any muscles, or you think that if it was black and blue, they could just, put some makeup over it and he'd still be fine. But I guess he has to actually use the arm. So I guess, they can't wait for him to recover.
We have a bit of good news from Prime Video as they've announced that they're rebooting RoboCop as a new series.
Amazon's MGM doesn't have that many franchises, and we can only tolerate so many Rocky reboots. So it was inevitable they'd get around to RoboCop at some point. The cult 1987 movie had 2 sequels and a remake, as well as I'll call it a low-budget TV series in 1994. I'm interested to see what they do with it this time.
Or RoboCop. I'd buy that for $1.
It looks like we're not done with the Archie weirdness, as producer Greg Berlanti is returning to the franchise with Afterlife with Archie, having been picked up as a series for Disney+.
Yeah, Berlanti is the producer who's made a name for himself doing these comic book-based series on the CW, a lot of the Arrowverse, Flash stuff, but he also did the Riverdale series on the CW, and that one wasn't supposed to be weird and paranormal. Now, this one is actually based on a comic book called Afterlife with Archie, which is Archie versus zombies, and evidently they're going all in on that.
But it seems that getting a green light on Disney Plus isn't as rock solid of a commitment as it used to be. We previously told you that Disney Plus had unexpectedly renewed their Marvel superhero series Wonder Man for a second season. Well, it was obviously too good to be true, as the second season of this critically acclaimed series has now been scrapped.
Sometimes I really wonder what is happening behind the scenes at Marvel, and this is a blueprint example. Wonder Man was originally only supposed to be a single season of television. If they just shut their mouths after it aired, everyone would have just hoped for another season for a long time. Marvel could have done something later, but no, they went ahead and announced, hey, we're going to go ahead and renew this. And then they never hired a writer's room. They never did anything to sign the contract players, one of which is Sir Ben Kingsley, to new contracts to guarantee that their presence would be available in future seasons. And so here we are. They've canceled it again. This was pointless and stupid, and I hate stories like that.
The best part is we'll be reminded of this again in a couple months because Yahya Abdul-Mateen was nominated for Best Actor at the Emmys.
And I hope he wins. He was great, but honestly, the real star here was Ben Kingsley, and the fact that he didn't get nominated is a tragedy.
There's more bad news for superheroes on streaming, as HBO Max has reportedly declined to move ahead with a series based on the DC hero Booster Gold. Or did they?
The news came out on social media from showrunner David Jenkins, who previously created one of my favorites, Our Flag Means Death, for HBO Max, but it appears the series may not be scrapped. He indicated that he'd been let go, and in fact, an entirely new creative team had been brought on board.
On Paramount Plus, Josh Lucas will be starring with Nicole Kidman and Elle Fanning on a new legal drama series, Discretion.
Really, I only wanted this one in here because where do Nicole Kidman and Elle Fanning even find the time anymore?
I was just going to say, what the heck? I just feel like they're in everything. Jez Butterworth and 101 Studios, who previously had Mobland and The Agency picked up by Paramount Plus, have had their new series, Laird, starring Kenneth Branagh, picked up by the streamer as well.
The description says it's an epic family saga set in the modern Scottish Highlands in which a proud Scot defies a shadowy American billionaire hell-bent on buying up the Glens. I'll be watching for the scenery.
Mm-hmm. In a different kind of reversal, Netflix has opted to renew Tyler Perry's Beauty in Black for a 4th season after previously saying it would end after 3 seasons.
Tyler Perry's had an eventful 12 months. There's been all kinds of weirdness with his personal life. And then he had a show supposedly not going to air on Paramount, just show up on Paramount Plus. And then they pulled it and then they showed it again. And now he's got this. I don't know. He's juggling so many different products right now that it must just be impossible for him to keep up.
Apple TV has picked up an adaptation of Rebecca Yaros's Peculiar Stars. Yaros is the best-selling author behind the Fourth Wing fantasy romance series.
Apple, why didn't you get Dungeon Crawler Carl instead? We'd know it was going to last if you had.
Good point. Benicio del Toro is going to try his hand at comedy in a new series, Protective Custody, on Apple TV.
Oh, yeah. Funny guy, Benicio del Toro.
I mean, you say that, but the instant I heard Protective Custody, I instantly remembered a scene from The Usual Suspects, and he tells a very, very funny joke in that scene. It was one of the first 2 things that sprang to mind. So, maybe.
Finally, Apple TV will put The Morning Show out of its misery after 5 seasons.
Yeah, you'll recall The Morning Show was one of the first marquee shows that launched with the Apple TV Plus streaming service initially. Yeah, I mean, it's had a good run, some critically acclaimed seasons and some pretty notable actors on it. But after 5 seasons, anyone who's telling you that they're watching it religiously is probably lying.
As always, we close it out with what's been keeping us busy over the last week. And yes, David and I saw a little something called Spider-Man Brand New Day. Us and millions of our closest friends, apparently. It absolutely is terrific. It deserves every viewer it's getting. It deserves the good reviews. It deserves the positive feedback from viewers. It's delightful. Tom Holland is wonderful. Go watch it. You will not regret it. The movie flies by. Just a great, great film. David, what did you think?
My main thought about it is that they didn't take shortcuts here. We all know what happened at the end of No Way Home. They cut off Peter Parker from his girlfriend and from his best friend, leaving him alone in the world because Aunt May also died in that film. He is a superhero with no one who knows his secret identity, no one to talk to, no one to trust. He's untethered as he starts this adult phase of his life, and they refused the temptation to give everyone back their memories 5 minutes in, which is frankly what I kind of expect from Sony Marvel films, is just bad ideas done loudly. And then we see Destin Daniel Cretton just completely control the story from start to finish. It never drags. It's about 2.5 hours long. There is a purpose to everything. There is the introduction of several other characters you'll recognize from previous Marvel stories, in addition to a new character introduced. And they're all fantastic for what they bring to the table. And by the end, I was not only happy with what we had, but excited to see where we go with it. And I think that that's all you can hope for with a film like this. They did it right and didn't take shortcuts, and that is so hard to say about most action movies today. So I'm delighted about it. I really am.
Raul, what's been keeping you busy?
Well, I bit the bullet and I watched the final season of The Bear on Hulu this week. I had been holding off, not the least of which because it really wasn't being marketed all that much. Not a lot of buzz online from people talking about how they watched The Bear. And sure, we knew it was coming. We do a whole podcast about what's new in streaming. But I was hesitant to watch it because of how difficult, let's say, season 4 was. There's a lot of drama and a lot of bad things happen to characters that we care for and love. And before I could even watch season 5 of The Bear, I had to watch the special episode called Gary. Hulu presents it as a separate special, but even the way the credits roll at the end, you realize it's just another episode of The Bear that happens between season 4 and season 5, although it is a flashback, and it's a flashback of a road trip that takes place between Richie and Mikey, whose suicide prior to season 1 basically triggers the storyline of The Bear. I wasn't necessarily in the right frame of mind to have to watch an entire episode of The Bear all about someone's struggles with mental illness. But after having heard David and Kim tell me how great the last season of The Bear was, I went ahead, I watched Gary. I'll tell everybody right now, it's not nearly as difficult a watch as I thought it would be. It's got an interesting little swerve at the end that I did not anticipate. It is more of a character study of the Richie character than it really is of Mikey. It is always interesting to see John Bernthal on screen. He always gives it his all with everything he does, and seeing what he does with Mikey is incredible. We've only ever seen him in flashbacks in previous episodes of The Bear, so to get a whole episode of him as Mikey was fascinating. It is sad at times, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a very difficult episode to watch. I would also argue that not a lot really happens in that episode. So the hardest part of watching that episode was frankly the pacing of it. But there's reasons to everything that happens in that episode. I then followed that up immediately, and if I could have, I would have watched it all in one night with season 5 of The Bear. Most of season 5, as David has told us, happens in one night. And unlike previous seasons of The Bear, where bad and terrible things happen to characters that we know and love, yes, bad things happen in this season, but in every sense, for every character, they persevere, they overcome. Essentially, this is the story of how these characters have grown in such a way so that when bad things do happen, they now demonstrate that they have the skills and talents and abilities to meet these challenges head on and overcome them. It is an incredible season of The Bear. I love it. I would say maybe even more than any of the 4 previous seasons of The Bear. It finishes incredibly strong. There's an interesting twist at the end with Carmi's character as to what it is he's going to do with his life. I'm not sure I buy it, but every character has their story arc. You can look at the entire complete 5 seasons of The Bear and see it as each individual's character's story arc. Is it Richie's story? Is it Carmi's story? For every one of them, you could say, I'm watching The Bear because I want to see what happens for this character from start to finish. And you can then start all over again and watch every season again as somebody else's story arc. It's fascinating the way the narrative is delivered. I am pleased that they are able to close the book on the story. There are not a lot of dangling plot lines in the end. Ultimately, I am so glad to have watched it. It was not what I feared, which was more stress and drama. Sure, there's stress because it's a series about people who work in a kitchen, and that is oftentimes very stressful. Heck, that's the premise of Hell's Kitchen on Fox, for instance. It's gonna be stressful. This is about how these people deal with it, and it is very fascinating. I loved it. It was great. It was so much better than season 4. I appreciate that season 4 was very much a dramatic character study for each of these characters. Sure, I'm being very superficial with it all, but I love that in season 5, we get to see basically each of these characters win in their own way. And that's what I loved about season 5.
And Tim, what's been keeping you busy?
I don't have much this week. I put a bow on the Assassin's Creed games by playing the DLC for Origins. It's just more of the same, more quests, more missions, and it just adds to the lore and the story. And again, Bayek was one of the best characters they've had in the series after Ezio, so highly recommended. When it goes on sale, it's still outrageously priced regularly, but during the big sales, it's somewhat regularly, they go on deep discount. I spent $15 for it, and that was absolutely worth it. And I will probably check out some of the later games and future sales as well. But for now, I'm looking for something else to throw a bunch of hours into. So hopefully something else comes along soon.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And thank you for listening to Streaming Into the Void. Please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, and we welcome your feedback. Remember that we're on social media at Streaming Void and online at streamingvoid.com. If you like what you're hearing, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/streamingvoid. Be sure to watch for us again next week.